Thank you for attending the November 28th study session to review and discuss the General Plan 2045. We will start our meeting this evening with a land acknowledgement. The City of Arcata acknowledges that the lands we are located on are the unceded ancestral lands of the Wiyot tribe. The land that Arcata rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Gudini, meaning over in the woods or among the redwoods. Past action by local, state, and federal governments removed the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from their land and threatened to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Arcata acknowledges the Wiyot community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement seeks to aid in dismantling the legacy narratives of settler colonialism. Our next item will be public comment this evening. And so as this is a special meeting, we will take public comment at the beginning of the meeting and only for items that are on the agenda. We will be limiting the public comment to 30 minutes tonight, but I don't think we'll have to necessarily do that. And we will have opportunity. We are kind of doing an engagement activity for the public to get involved on the vision statement as well. So there will be more time to talk to your commissioners and council members during that. If you are on Zoom, you can raise your Zoom hand if you're interested in making comment, and we will open it up. So please make your way to the podium if you are here to comment. And Scott is setting up the timer.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do roll call if you want.
I can come sit back there.
Yeah, but we can do it after public comment.
Line it up.
Oh, I thought you were doing roll call. I thought you were doing roll call. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. I'll be pretty brief. Patricia and I did some volunteering with AHA and Eureka at their showers there, and so I'm a little tired, but wrote down a few things. And but I'll start with this because it was related to that. There's going to be another one of those on Thursday in Arcata, and I realized that we're speaking here with it. Hopefully with people that are watching too, they did use up a lot of their supplies, a lot of men's shoes, a lot of men's pants, a lot of warm clothing. They gave away a lot of food. A lot of people came there to eat. So it would be helpful, hopefully with people listening or whatever, that maybe more donations of things like that. A lot of things like shoes, size 10 and larger, men's pants, like 30 on up on waist. And yeah, and so it's good. And I think I was surprised. I mean, a lot of people were so happy to see the showers, the food, and everything. So it's really good. So from there, as I said, I'm a little tired. So I just had a few thoughts. I wish to ask of staff and council, what is the updates on the K Street safety improvements, and has any further considerations been given for design of a Woolworth on L Street, and would staff and council be open to the idea of a community visioning for an L Street linear park? And then the other thing that I just wanted, I'm hoping would just be cleared up, is I noticed on page 16 of the agenda packet of the circulation and mobility element, the K&L couplet is still highlighted, and I was wondering if that diagram will be remedied. And beyond that, anyway, good luck with everything tonight. Thanks for everything.
Hey Jim, can I ask you, where could you make donations?
Well, it's through AHA, so you can, they do have a website. Oh, sorry, seems like I'm not saying Joe. Yeah, they do have a website. Nezzy runs, I'm forgetting Nezzy's last name right now. Nezzy Wade, thank you. I'm beyond transit on Thursday.
And
Yeah,
I'm also picking up donations already, so if anybody wants to call me, I'll be glad to come by and get them and drop them off and get them to Nancy.
all right, thanks.
Good evening. I'm going to cede my time to Fred Wise. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Fred Wise of Arcata1.com. Welcome, everyone, and look forward to the dialogue. I support strongly dialogue between the City Council and the Planning Commission. We welcome the introduction, not an update, of potential citywide inclusionary zoning process, although I'm not optimistic about its outcome at this time. In my opinion, there should not be a single word spoken tonight from staff or from you on anything that is in the staff report on inclusionary zoning or on attachment E of the transportation policies. Not one word. Otherwise, it can be viewed as an attempt to bypass the FPPC recusal rulings on no gateway discussions on the 5-person city council. Those sections of the staff report are gateway area plan matters. They are presented in this evening's staff report as though they were general plan items, but they are not. The council went over this with great clarity 2 weeks ago at your November 15th meeting. The Planning Commission we look forward to the Planning Commission selecting many of the gateway area plan policies as being appropriate for citywide policy. The Commission has not done that yet. Attachment E is a direct copy of all of the gateway area plan mobility policies. This evening's staff report says 6 times that the Commission's recommendations on inclusionary zoning were what they were. Says it 6 times they were gateway area recommendations. Not one time does the staff report make a distinction that these are not citywide recommendations. I consider that to be misleading. The 2 consecutive meetings here, we've had staff reports that, as I see it, are misleading and can be considered to be deceitful. I request the council and the city manager to ask the community development director to stop doing this immediately. The staff report states that there were 3 study sessions to discuss various aspects of the general plan. Unless the gateway area plan is now an aspect, then that is a false statement. As we know, there were 2 study sessions for gateway area plan and 1 for general plan at this point. The commission meeting where the vision statement took place was disjointed and confusing. Even to the commissioners. I think we all know that. This was discussed by Commissioner Mayer at the October 24th joint study session. To claim that there's a recommendation that came out of that, I think is a little iffy. Attachment B is a very slight editing of what was drafted by a task force 23 years ago in 2000 from the General Plan 2020 document. Back then, as one example, we're looking at a population growth to around 20,000. That was called a, quote, modest growth rate. In this version, we're looking at 20,000 to 27,000. The words modest growth rate are still there. These vision statements need a lot of work. I look forward to what comes out of tonight. I support what Arcata is doing and what our city represents, but I think the vision statements read like an advertising or a marketing brochure. It says that we are preventing pollution. I don't think anyone can prevent pollution. It says that we are protecting the environment and the land so they can be enjoyed by the 7th generation. I think that's a bit of a stretch too. So in general, I like the vision statement. I think it needs some editing here and there. I will recommend that the council appoint a task group of 1 or 2 council members or commissioners plus citizens to write a new vision statement and present that to the Planning Commission at a future meeting, and then modify that. But as it is, it's not to my liking, I'll put it that way. Circulation and mobility, I'll point out that circulation is about motion, transportation is about getting goods or people from one place to another place. The word transportation is there 20 times in the first 3 pages. It's not the transportation element anymore, but transportation is the big theme. For there to be transportation, people have to go somewhere. If a person is driving, they have to park somewhere. I don't like parking any more than anyone else, but that's the world that we live in. I look forward to a future when we're not driving cars. In the packet tonight, there are a few policies I want to point out. CM-1B, this calls for, quote, comprehensive integrated transportation network that is safe, accessible, comfortable, accommodating, and welcoming to users of all ages, races, ethnicities, incomes, and physical abilities, and for all modes of transportation. People with infirmities, people with children, people with jobs where they don't have transportation, or they aren't included in that statement. I think you need to take great care about this. The 8th and 9th Street couplet will see about half as much parking around the creamery as there was. I'd like to hear from the business community how they feel about this. There's a guiding principle that says establish a set of fee-based parking prices that are high enough to drive more active and shared transportation. I think it's a very slippery slope, not worded well. What's high enough to stop people driving their cars? Is parking rates of $20 an hour high enough, or $50 an hour? Anyway, that's my point. Thanks for your work. I look forward to tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Joanne McGarry, and I'm a little late coming here, but I'm really interested in this ongoing saga. Just as a story, this Thanksgiving Day, because I didn't have any invitations anywhere, I decided to fast, and I decided to stand in the center of the plaza for several hours with a peace flag on my back. And I had the opportunity to be in the center of our town at a time when very few people were around, hardly any cars were around. The sensation was sensational in terms of giving me a really clear idea of what is, what was, and what can be. So I know I wax philosophical all the time here, because unlike Fred here, I don't do my homework as easily as others are able to do. And it's really hard sometimes reading through this thing. And I did read the vision statement today and before I came over here, and it does read very interesting, like something out of Seinfeld, when, what's her name was, the girlfriend, Lorraine, is that her name? Anyway, I just think Arcata, somebody had mentioned a few meetings ago, organic. We need to do things organically, much more than we do things so systematically and bureaucratically and cookie cutterly. I've always argued that Humboldt County and the place that we live in the Redwood Forest, I was a park ranger at Muir Woods for a few seasons, and I would tell people visiting there that everything you need to know about surviving on this planet, you can learn in an old growth redwood forest. So there's something called biomimicry. It's where you take what happens in nature and you apply it to the human condition. And I think we really need to be much more organic, much more grounded, rooted in our history, looking at the history so we don't make the same mistakes that we made historically, or looking at the history and seeing how things were and the way things were done and how things were located and why they were there. And there just needs to be a much more spiral of life, organic sensation to everything we're doing here, as opposed to some sort of pamphlet or brochure about the visitor center bureau of like, come to Humboldt and live here because we're going to house you in a multi-story thing that you used to have in San Francisco. So carry on, and thank you for letting me speak up.
Thank you, folks. Do we have anybody online this evening? Okay.
Go ahead, Colin.
Good evening. This is Colin Fisk with CRTP, the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. I'm going to comment on the mobility element and just say that we're very impressed with the work the Planning Commission did to update those policies to reflect current evidence and best practices and values for transportation equity, health, safety, and addressing the climate crisis, including things like acknowledging public transit as a civil right and prioritizing slow and safe travel for all people on all streets. I want to call particular attention to new policy direction provided by the Commission to eliminate level of service or congestion reduction as a policy goal, and to reform parking rules by eliminating costly parking mandates for new development and exploring a downtown smart meter program. These are very important steps, but there do remain some inconsistencies regarding the policies in the draft document that should be addressed. So first, while the policies call for using level of service only as a measure of traffic calming rather than for congestion management, the majority of specific road projects included in the document, which is table CM5, are explicitly about improving level of service, i.e. reducing congestion, which goes against the new policy. Of course, congestion reduction sounds nice on its surface, but the reason that we're moving away from that is we now know it only leads to more driving and higher and less safe speeds. And so it's really pointless to have policies that call for slow speeds and less driving if the projects to be implemented have the opposite effect. So we just ask that you remove from the plan projects whose primary purpose or primary effect is for level of service or congestion management. Regarding parking regulation, the new policy calls for eliminating parking minimums and exploring the smart meter program with revenues potentially to fund better transit service. And those are both key strategies for transportation equity and reducing climate pollution. But neither of them has a corresponding implementation action in section 2.9. And again, the policies are only as good as the actions that implement them. So we ask that you add specific implementation plans for the smart meter program and the parking mandate elimination. Also, just want to mention that there's some other remnant language from earlier versions of the documents that appears to contradict the new policy directions. For example, the implementation table calls for a traffic impact fee program, which implies historically congestion management rather than a more comprehensive transportation impact fee. And then there's the gateway plan policy, which calls for eliminating parking mandates for all uses except hotels and employment centers. But my recollection is that the commission recommended eliminating those mandates with no exceptions. So we just recommend that there be a careful review of the documents for internal consistency prior to final approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Do we have anybody else on Zoom? All right. Well, thank you for public comment. All right, so that takes us into our new business this evening, which is to consider draft elements of the general plan. So we are coming together for an opportunity as council members to learn from the commission on their recommendations. Did you want to do that? Oh, I don't. I mean, we've never done it. Yeah.
You can skip
Yeah.
it. You can do it if you want, but you can skip it.
Yeah. And again, thank you to the commission for all your work on the general plan and everything that goes with it. So we're going to be workshopping the vision statement tonight, and then we're going to also look at the circulation and mobility chapter. And then again, some thoughts on inclusionary zoning, which I requested to be on the agenda because I do recall from our previous study session, that was actually one thing that people were like, why isn't this citywide? And that was brought up, and it was brought up to me by other council members as well. So that's why that's on the agenda for a citywide thing tonight. And so we'll just have a quick update on the commission's recommendation for that. So with that, we're going to kind of jump into our visioning activity for the vision statement. I'm just going to kind of defer to you to and ask David too, just seeing numbers of members of the public, it might maybe be better if we maybe only do 2 groups instead of 3, or that might get a little muddled. Either way.
Yeah, we can talk about that when we get into
Okay.
the detail. I am going to hand it over. We'll try and be brief, but we want to discuss the process with everybody involved so that y'all know what we're doing and have the opportunity to ask questions if you have any about the process. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen. She's going to kick us off.
So I'm just going to give you a little background. The community vision is a statement of Arcata's values and sets the tone for the general plan. So that's kind of why it's important and why we're talking about it. I'm going to give you a little background as to how we came to the community vision because it's been such a long process. I think it's important to kind of go back to the very beginning. And in order to craft it, we actually held 2 community visioning sessions. One of them was in December of 2020, and then the next one was in February of 2021. We also posted a recap on our YouTube that's really great. So if you haven't had a chance to go back and review those, it would be awesome to look at the recap. It's just like a 5 or 10 minute recap. During that time, we also circulated a survey and got feedback from community members that way who were not able to attend. Because if you'll remember, 2020, 2021 was a difficult time. I believe both of those were visioning statements that were done via Zoom. So common themes that came out during that engagement were community, sustainability and conservation, health and well-being, accessibility, equity and inclusivity, engagement with local tribes, the importance of art and artists to our community, and then the connection with Cal Poly. So those were some of the things that came out during those engagement sessions. So you'll see those weaved throughout the vision statement, or you should. If you don't, please let us know. Using the themes that came out of that engagement and still relevant pieces of the old vision statement, we crafted the vision statement that you see here. We also received input from Change Lab Solutions, which is a nonprofit. I think that you've heard of them before because they really worked with us on our health element. And they're committed to advancing health equity, so it was really important that they gave us feedback on that. So that's sort of how we came to the revised vision that you see here, that the Planning Commission made the recommendation to move forward with. Today, I think we talked about this a little bit, but we're going to ask everyone to go to separate tables and discuss different sections of the vision statement. And I'm going to let David go through that so you can kind of get an idea of exactly what we're going to do, and then we'll break into those groups. Does anybody have questions about that?
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to describe the process that we'll go through these breakout sessions, and let you all ask questions if you have any, because we'll be doing work at each of 3 different tables. And I would recommend 3, I'll follow your lead on that, but I'm just thinking the more policies that we have to talk about will lengthen the time that we spend at those tables. Okay. Okay, so we'll break into 3 groups, and you can self-select to the tables, but what we'd like to accomplish is to have, no more than 2 council members at any given table, and then, 1 to 2 planning commissioners at each table, 2 or, 6. So there'll be two planning commissioners, one at one table, based on who we have here today. So those 3 breakout groups will be meeting for a total of 20 minutes each. And each group is then going to appoint a facilitator, likely a council member sitting at the table, and then a note taker, likely a staff member sitting at the table. Will each be separated out through each of those tables. And we'll start with, the facilitator will be trying to keep the conversation moving, tracking the time, that sort of thing. And the note taker is going to track the conversation, focusing on specific recommendations for changes to the vision statement. So we won't be writing everything down, but if there's a recommendation for change, we're going to note that down. And again, the conversation is intended to be concise. So the facilitator may ask, you to make your point or move on if you're getting lengthy, to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. What we're going to do at those tables is the facilitator will move through the questions that we've identified for each of the vision statements. And the idea behind the questions is to suss out, the group's feelings about whether or not, we're on target, what are we missing, how could we modify this. The note taker will then be taking specific actions to modify that statement while you're in these groups. And we're not going to spend a lot of time discussing at that point. We're just going to kind of brainstorm session, get all of these ideas onto the notepad. We've got large format paper that we'll be taking notes on. Once we get close to the end of that 20-minute session, we'll call a pause for everyone. We'll be tracking time, and everyone will stop and start working on summarizing and looking at the recommendations that have been made by that group and going through and identifying, as decision makers. Now, this will be just the Planning Commission and the City Council doing this part. As decision makers, do we want to recommend to the full City Council that we adopt the ideas that came up here? So we'll be using a code system of circling for, yes, let's add this to the vision statement, underlining if it was kind of a split vote, maybe let's add this, and then striking out if the vote amongst those decision makers was, no, let's not include that component. Then we'll regroup. So we're going to come back together at this table, just the decision makers then will be looking at the summaries. The facilitator will report out, the note taker will post up onto the front board there the outcomes from that conversation. And then the council will be making the decisions about which to include and which not to include in the vision statement going forward. And so that'll be a process that we can run through to try and get some modifications, sourcing from, the few people who showed up here tonight, ideas, sourcing from you all some ideas, but then also recognizing, as Jen said, that, this just didn't materialize out of nowhere. This was actually produced from community work. Including, I think, 500 individual survey responses. So it was, there's some grounding in community work that we've done already. Does that make sense? Yeah, questions?
Does each table include 1/3 of the recent vision statement?
Yes, so there are 6 total. Each table will have 2. Good question. Does the process in general make sense? Okay. Then Jen has a few more final comments.
I'm just going to tell you where to go. So this table will be discussing conservation and diverse character. There's 2 tables in the back. The first one here is going to discuss prosperity and equity, and then the one farther down the hall is going to be health and safety and community well-being and connection and community. So if you want to kind of make some decisions on where you want to go.
One more quick point. I do apologize for the folks on Zoom. We're going to be kind of pausing the Zoom while we're in breakout sessions because there's no way to allow folks on Zoom to see what's going on in these breakouts, but we will be reconvening and reporting out what the results of those were.
Great, let's go for it, folks. Thank you.
Okay, we are reconvened. I just wanted to re-summarize the instructions. So the facilitator from the table will be describing what the changes were, and then the note taker will be keeping track of the yeses or nos from just the council. Now, the council is going to say, yes, we like that change, or no, let's move on from that.
Okay, so for equity, the only change that we came up with in our group was to add age. So where it says potential because of race, religion, age, social position, economic position, and so on. So that was the only addition to the equity section. Does anybody disagree with that? Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah, on my notes I took before the meeting, that was the only section that I did not edit. So, yeah, I agree with you guys.
Well, just because this is probably going to come up a couple of times, but ensure, the second word on there, when we get to ours, we're discussing changing that word to soften it, because to ensure to us meant to guarantee. And I think we can do our very best and we could strive. So I just think that we should, in general, question whether we are going to be able to guarantee all these things.
So can I just comment to that? Because we had a little bit of that in our group with one of the, some of the language in here as well. The vision statement, we're not necessarily committing to this vision statement as like, we're going to do all of these things. We're going to ensure this is going to happen. We're going to, prevent pollution, et cetera. What the vision statement is our ideal version of ourselves in 20 years. And so the vision statement lines out this ideal version where we are able to ensure that, everyone has this access. And then our policies is really where we're committing, and our implementation is where we're really committing to what those actions are. So certainly want the council to feel comfortable in changing that language, but that was kind of the concept behind the reasons why it was written the way that it was written.
And that makes sense, and it makes sense here, but, the words, people read them just what they see, so if we don't have an intro saying, if we want to be so straightforward, then I think there should be an intro that says, in a perfect world, if we were doing our best, all the things, because if we don't, someone's just going to read it and go, well, they're not doing that. So I feel like we either need to soften it or just be prepared to have a lot of public comment about it. That's fine, either way.
Is there a way that we could proceed it with these are aspirational vision, maybe?
I mean, a vision statement, as we know, that's what it is, right? We're all agreeing, well, it's a vision statement, so it seems redundant, but, it might not be.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Stacey.
No,
Well, I might add too, because I just like word diversity, and both like the health and safety, the paragraph before, and equity both start with we ensure. But the other ones, there's also we are committed to. And so we changed ours to strive. So if you guys want to keep ensuring, we're just going to strive on ours. And then we have word diversity between our paragraphs. But
So can we wordsmith that maybe? Because I'm starting to hear what Stacy's saying. A different word?
So take the insurers and tone them down.
I like Sarah's idea of just having like different kind of intros for all of them that mean generally the same thing, but I like the changing of the language. I like
it reads
the
like a
strive
whereas
for,
almost,
yes, right. I like.
So I got word diversity that is a little less strict than ensure. Okay.
that sounds good to me.
Okay, we can figure that out after the fact. Kind of got clear direction if that's where we end up.
Okay, and everybody's good with age, adding age. I just want to confirm.
Just the original.
The red marker is for no, the green. Okay, the red marker is for yes. We'll cross out. Then it means no. You're messing with the system, Jen.
So this one had a little bit more to it. We are committed to ensuring that everyone has access to quality lifelong learning, education, and opportunities for economic success. We support and encourage responsible economic activity across industry sectors, from retail activity, restaurants, and entertainment, to entrepreneurs, artisans, local small businesses, and all members of the business community. We wanted to make sure that our large businesses that are large employers are not left out of this statement. So, and then how do you feel about that? Housing is a side note, so we can talk about that after.
I think that's really good, and I like that. Something that I kind of wrote down in my notes about something to possibly add to this paragraph as well was something that was in the other version of the community vision that talked about kind of recognizing citizens that support local investment. And I really liked that sentence that was used in there because it kind of also, yes, we have all these local businesses and small businesses, but it also puts it on the community that like we as a community like to support that idea. And so I liked that phrase that was used in the previous version, citizens that support local investment. So if others agree to add something like that, I would like to see that.
I actually really love that. Thanks.
Can we add, instead of citizens, residents?
Okay, with that addition, is everybody okay with everything else? I'm seeing nodding heads, yes.
Repeat what your notes are so we can edit.
Residents that support local investment.
And then we just wanted to note that housing came up in our sections and was really needed or wanted throughout. And so we didn't know that this was necessarily the best place to put housing, but just wanted to address that and affordable housing. So that came up in our table. So just wanted to throw that out there. So who wants to go next?
I think that needs to be like a whole paragraph of its own too. Like we tried to kind of weave it in a little bit and we added the word, but I think if we had like a standalone paragraph that did address, commitment to building or commitment to housing creation that is, sustainable and affordable and accessible to our community, I feel like we could get a few sentences out of that.
That might also fit in the diverse character paragraph. We can look at that.
Do you want me to narrate it? Because I'm by the microphone. Yeah. Great. So again, the first thing we did was change ensure to strive or similar language. We did a little of our own wordsmithing. We were kind of getting clunked up on the phrase social and community context. So we just wanted to change that to just community. And then mostly we had a few things to add about this. So within health and safety and community, we kind of saw as a perfect place to add kind of some stuff about like walkability. And so we kind of added into that piece about we see opportunities for artistic expression, recreation, access to the natural environment, and walkable communities as a key component, or access to walkability as a key component of a healthy community. And so that's what we were kind of talking about, adding a little bit just about that at the end, because those are all things that were listed on the kind of memo about what was talked about in those sessions, but kind of lacking, even though, yes, we do have a whole big circulation element, but, and then again, we kind of put housing availability as, where's that gonna go? And then we added, inclusive community instead of community context, that's what it was, so, yeah. Anything else about that? Yeah, or, well, I think, didn't we put that in our second one? Was that in our second one?
Can you repeat what?
Oh, and
he's not mic'd
Netra
up.
said, yeah, we wrote up their connection with Cal Poly Humboldt and how, that is a diverse group that makes our community more rich, and where we would include that. I think, though, we did end up adding that to our second one, so, but that was something that was kind of, lacking on that throughout the whole document. That was, expressed as a vision of the community.
Why don't, just circle, there you go. And you can do it in blue if you want.
Yeah, go ahead, please, yeah.
I was just wondering, and maybe it's redundant, but on the second one, packet page 9, at the end, it says ensuring all residents have the opportunity to live healthily and prosper.
Yeah.
Okay, are we doing all red or?
It is a little, I guess I would say maybe it is slightly redundant, but I think that exact same sentence could be kind of, just make that first sentence sound a little better, basically, because I do prefer the way the one that you just read is written. Ensuring your residents have opportunities.
So I think if you just make a note to pull the, what is it, the prosperity sentence, is that?
We keep it healthful is on page.
We keep it healthful sentence. Just make a note that we keep it healthful from original.
I'm not getting that, so hold on.
Just write a note somewhere on the bottom that says, bring in, we keep it healthful sentence from original. Yeah, we'll know what that means. We keep it healthful.
We'll know it, yeah.
Healthy, we keep it healthy. Thank you.
So just so I make sure that I understand this when I'm editing it, we're not adding the Cal Poly Humboldt to this particular one, correct? Okay, so Natra, will you line out that Cal Poly? Yep, thank you.
Strike?
Yep, because it's going to be on your next page, I think you decided. And then everything else is included.
Any other comments from fellow council members about that one?
Can I just take a quick break and ask, can you folks see this okay on the computer monitors, what we're doing over here? The way it's projected? That works? Okay.
I know, yeah, we got a big table. Okay, and our second section was the connection and community, and again, we did a little wordsmithing. Seniors and students, families and singles, it kind of read like a come on down thing. So we just changed that to some of the language that was in the previous version, which was Arcatans of every, and then we added in age, race, because we kind of took the part out where it differentiates between age groups. And then we didn't like strata, so we changed that to background. And then just kind of slimming down their community present in all civic activities. We thought civic and governmental was kind of redundant. And just a little, I don't know, bureaucratic. And then our connectivity goes beyond Arcata, just kind of making that regional approach sound a little better. And then this is where we added working with Cal Poly Humboldt, and we kind of added some language that can be smithed later just about richness of educational opportunities and working to grow with Cal Poly, and kind of, just tapping on that collaboration. And if anybody else from our group has something to add about that, because I know we talked about that a lot, and Peter had a lot to add on that too. But I think this is the spot kind of to add about that connection with our other community here, which is Cal Poly. So go ahead, questions, comments?
Yeah, I think
Tear us
that is
down.
absolutely the appropriate place to add the Cal Poly relationship. I see that you have gender identity, but what we don't have is sexual orientation. Is it all right if we add that in as well? Does that belong?
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
fine with that.
Is there somewhere we might talk about, and I don't know the proper nomenclature term, but abilities, differently abled? We don't really address that anywhere in there. I think it's super important.
Yeah, you could add people from every abilities. Yeah.
and maybe, like, whoever's working on it can.
Anything else from council to add or change on that one? Or are we good with the proposed changes? I see nods. All right. And our final group. Thank you, Netra.
Yeah, absolutely. So we looked at conservation and talked about how this sort of landed for us, and we all agreed that there was a certain sort of vagueness and hard to understand component to the first sentence. We're committed to living well, and so on and so forth. So we decided to strike that piece, and when it came to within Arcata's resource base, we wanted to add the word, work in there, sustainability, just because it felt like that sort of encompassed a lot of different components of the ways in which we would want to live within our resource base. So suggested adding sustainability there. And then really felt like the last sentence should probably be the first sentence because it felt like it spoke more directly to conservation. Obviously, it would not start with "and," but we pride ourselves on our continuing efforts to preserve the unique natural beauty within and around the city. And then, in addition to that, we wanted to just add some clarity and specifically call out the marsh and the sanctuary as components that we were most proud of and wanted to have reflected in that vision statement. And then lastly, the reference to seventh generation was something that felt like there could be a little more elaboration on that so that anyone reading it would fully understand the intended meaning behind that phrase.
What do you mean by sanctuary? The marsh is the sanctuary?
Wildlife sanctuary.
Yeah, exactly.
I would add the redwood forest, the community forest. I mean, to me, that's...
Yeah, there was a little bit of back and forth because you could certainly say that pride ourselves on continuing efforts to preserve the unique natural beauty within and around the city encompasses the marsh, the redwood forest. So do we have to list everything? But there was consensus that the marsh needed call out. So that's before you can expand, adopt, subtract,
We could still say like. What Peter was saying is, I think that we could maybe wordsmith it so we would say wildlife sanctuary, which is our marsh, and then say, and our redwood forests.
Because on this original one, too, the first one, there's even a picture of the Arcata Community Forest sign. So I think just our community forest or something, I think would be a good addition. While I have the mic. Well, one other thing, just while I'm on the mic, this is a section, and I kind of, in my notes, added, I feel like something that was on the list that isn't talked about in the vision statement is climate change. And I think that, we strive to fight the climate crisis by lowering our emissions and promoting sustainable living or something, just something about addressing the climate crisis, I think could be in conservation, and I think is something important to include, just because I feel like that is something that we talk about and want to, hit head on, and we're working on the climate action plan, and we're promoting all these, sustainable building practices and things like that. So I think that would be, this would be a good place to just include a quick sentence about, fighting climate change.
Just when we were doing our Sarah trails was important to you, and then we cut it because we cut everything out. So I didn't know if you wanted the trails to be with the forest and marsh, but I personally I think listing 3 things, if there's a multitude of natural resources that we have, I feel like 3 kind of implies it's a list, 2 kind of implies that's all we have. So I think maybe doing 3 things might be better. So add trails or something.
I like that. I'm wondering if we lost the word redwood. I don't know. Can you hear me? Sorry. Did we lose the redwood in place of just community forest, or were we going to say?
I haven't written it down yet because I was waiting to hear from the majority of the council.
So
Sounds like we got it.
the marsh, forests, and trails, like that.
Yes, because the marsh and the forest have trails, and that works good for me because I like preserving our trails.
So,
And everybody good on climate change?
yes, very much so. So to clarify, that last sentence would be versed, and then we would say committed to sustainability and within Arcata's resource base. That's the next sentence. Committed to
Living sustainably and within Arcata's resource base.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Anything else to add on that one, council, or other final thoughts before we move to the next paragraph and the last paragraph?
I was just curious, did we, because I can't see that far, we have the sentence in there, prevent pollution, et cetera, conserve?
Yeah, that was
So
left in.
Did we decide to use we will, or did we decide to say we strive to?
We landed on the understanding that it was a vision that we were striving for and the perfect Arcata we would like to see in 20 years. Almost nothing to add to this. Everyone, audience, community members, everyone at the table liked this, felt like it was just said everything it needed to and needed less work. The one suggestion was to further clarify the relationship or the importance of Cal Poly Humboldt by quoting the language from the first version that references Cal Poly Humboldt as a stimulating presence in our town and one of our most important assets, so something like that. So we just wanted to port that language from that first version into this diverse character section.
So when we added it, something about Cal Poly in the other section, does that kind of cover that, or is it something that we need?
I would imagine that staff would want to make sure those two pieces are aligned, but, we came at it, a similar idea, working in tandem.
Absolutely.
I almost think that this concept, based on where you came up with the Cal Poly connection with the community connections, might make more sense in that one as a friendly amendment. Would that make sense to you, Councilmember White?
That's fine, thank you.
Yes, that sounds good.
Could I clarify, are we using, I can't remember the verbiage that we used in the earlier one. I like from the one on page 9, from the original one of, it's a stimulating presence and one of our community's most important assets. Is that what we were talking about? Perfect, thank you.
And we'll move that section then to the community connection one and still have that same language, but put it with the other Cal Poly stuff.
And I don't know where this might fit, but we haven't said anything about our beautiful coast and oceans.
There's not really any ocean in Arcata, though. We're on the bay, but that's not ours, It's nearby, but it's not, Arcata doesn't necessarily manage or, touch any beach, per se. Bay, but I guess we talk about the marsh. The marsh is, yeah. All right, any final thoughts from council or commission before we take a quick 5-minute break and come back to talk about circulation? All right, let's take that quick little bathroom break and come on back. Yeah, well, we're gonna get started and keep us moving there. It's a normal planning commission night. You'd be up late. No. Okay, folks. All right, we're back, and we're going to talk about the circulation element. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff to present kind of the main changes, and then we can hear from our planning commission about what they believed was important in that element, and then we can give any direction or talk about any edits or changes or what we like about it. So take it away, staff.
Good evening. Yeah, so our department has been involved in working with community development and consultants on this general plan update. Most of the policies are there, been modified, and we are in line with that. So before I even go on the policies, I will not be going over the policies in detail. I'll go maybe background. Our goal in the city is to be bike-friendly, pedestrian-friendly, and increase our ridership. Currently, as a bike-friendly city, we are silver status. As a pedestrian-friendly city, we have a bronze status. And our ridership is, I would say, is low. It's below 100,000 people using our transit every year. Our next level is to go up. For bike-friendly city, we want to be at gold or platinum in future. For pedestrian-friendly city, we want to be move to silver, then gold. That's our ultimate goal. For ridership, we want to increase the ridership to level of 200,000. The reason I'm saying is 200,000 because when HSU was at peak, our ridership was just below 200,000. So we can get there. We are not there yet, but we can get there. So why I'm saying this because all the policies that we have in our general plan, those policies will lead us to those goals. They will be in line with those goals. So if we implement those policies, we will be able to reach those goals. In next 20 years, definitely we will have some growth, moderate growth, or we'll see how the growth happens. But we have to estimate something that how it's going to happen. So we have seen the numbers. We know there will be growth. There will be more pedestrians, more bicyclists, more vehicles on the streets. So what is that we're going to do? Is our infrastructure sufficient to accommodate those future demands? The short answer is yes, we can, but there will be some congestions on major streets. So with that in mind, we have provided a list of projects in our general plan. You will see there are a list of projects. They are not the projects that will be surely happening, but those are the projects that will mitigate some of the congestion and help. And I'm sure you will have some questions on those projects, and I'll go on specific if you have questions on specific projects. But all those projects will be constructed and completed in line with our complete street policy, which is to have equal opportunity for every single user, which will be designed for all users, plus the landscape. So bicyclists, pedestrians, and vehicles. So they all will be designed for that. Along with that, there are also other projects for trail improvements we'll be doing in next 20 years. We have some outlined, but there will be others which are not here, but we will be doing. Similarly, there are some projects which are not on the list, but we'll be doing in future in 20 years, because at this point, we don't know what exactly those projects are. For example, recently, early this year, we started working on a project called Reconnecting Arcata, because Arcata is divided by a highway, and there's no proper connectivity. So how are we going to improve the connectivity? So we have not established a project, but we are working towards it. So that will be happening in future. So we are working towards it. So those are the initial things. And then the other thing I want to say, the biggest change you will see in our general plan is LOS. We used to measure the efficiency of intersection or a road in terms of level of service. So moving forward, we will not be using the term, like we will be using that as a tool, but not as a tool to use for environmental documents. We will be using VMT, and the goal would be to reduce the vehicle miles traveled through the projects. So this is just my quick synopsis. I'm sure you have questions, and David maybe will have some more addition to that, but I'm here to answer any questions you have on the projects listed in the general plan.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one process piece and also to touch on a couple of the comments that had come up from public members. So the figures, one comment was made that the figures still show the K&L Street couplet, and that is true. Those will be revised. We haven't had our consultants revise the figures yet. That'll be the last thing we do before we publish this as a final document. So recognize that that's still in there. So thank you for that. And then to many of the comments around potential changes to the specific element, happy to address those if the council or commission have questions. I do think that the commission rather had looked at these concepts before and made specific recommendations in light of these public comments, but I think, obviously we're still in draft documents, so if there are changes that need to be made there, we can certainly do that. And then lastly, I did want to point out that the staff report did include the element, or I'm sorry, the policy from, the council considered at its last meeting to incorporate into the general plan. And I think that, and the mayor can speak to this in more detail, but I think the mayor wanted to make sure that we had these available to us in case there was a desire to start looking at, as this group, which of those policies should be left out and which should be ported in. So I think that's all I have to start off.
Yeah, I just kind of following on to what Netra said, and I think looking at this component, I think we all want to see all of those goals happen: less vehicle miles traveled, more public transportation, better pedestrian and bike access. So I think the discussion would be, it would be better to frame it as a question of, are there pieces in here that we don't want to move over? And let's see if there's ones that are really gateway specific. But I think broadly, the more that we can, more of this policy that can end up in the general plan, the better, because it's going to just broaden the impact of this across the city. So as opposed to looking at it from what do we want to move over, I think it's more efficient and better if we look at it as, are there a few things that we don't want to move over? And there are some specific pieces that are clearly gateway specific, but outside of that, I would suggest that we move as much as we can over and just look for pieces that maybe don't conform.
And to maybe avoid talking about the gateway at this meeting, we could just say to that policy, no, let's not move it into the general plan and not discuss where it's going to land.
Right. Yeah, oh, go ahead. I was going to invite people to talk, so please talk.
No, I really want to thank Netra, because that was my first question, to make sure that we called out the complete streets policy, making sure that everything that we do is going to follow that. The one thing I would love to add, I told David before, I still would really like to make G and H one lane each. So if the council is okay with adding that, I feel pretty strongly about that.
Yeah, I definitely have spoken about this as well and support the road diet for G&H Street as well. I was going to ask just a clarifying question, and this could just be, we want to do this, but if we can't do that, let's do this. But I kind of just see some redundancies. I'm looking at like the bikeway and trail improvements. Like it says like class 1 trail on 11th Street from Bayview to Janes, but then it says class 2 bike lane on 11th Street from Janes to B Street. Like, so those kind of follow the same path. So I'm just wondering, like how does that shake out on here? And some of these seem kind of redundant trail passes is all I'm saying. And so like, is it kind of saying like we would prefer this to be a class 1 trail, but if we can't do a class 1, let's make it a class 2 bike lane? Okay.
Exactly. It's a function of how much right of way we have or how much public space we have to do that. Where was that specific, on which page was that?
I'm just looking on packet page 29, and one of the ones that popped out to me was like, yeah, it says 11th Street, and I was like, I highlighted that because I was like, great, we need improvements to 11th Street desperately for, bike and pedestrian and just slow that traffic. And so it's listed under both class 1 and class 2. So, but.
And I just want to clarify, I think I asked David, but I just want to clarify, just because now that all our buses are run by HDA, do we need to like take out where it says AMRTS as part of it, or just because it's still Arcata buses, we can leave that in?
Yes, currently we still have the ownership. We have a contract services with them, so they are doing work for the city at this point, but maybe in future, but right now it's still MRTS.
Any other questions from the council for our commissioners, or thoughts from commissioners of policies that were important to the commission, or anything like that?
I guess I just wanted to jump back to the comments that Colin Fisk made about the table that includes level of service as a justification for some of the improvements. And there are multiple reasons you might make some of these improvements. And so we can have a conversation about, like, is it safety? Is it something else? But then we had this whole debate about, reducing the emphasis on level of service, and then those things are still in the document. And so I guess I just wanted to flag that and maybe have a conversation about it.
Well, when we did this initial analysis for the general plan update, and we analyzed the existing intersection, that was only 2 levelable, so that's what we use, and that's what only the frame of reference we had to use that. So if you want to modify that, we can look into it, and if you are asking to get rid of the word LOS totally, we can see how we can do that, but that was the reason.
Yeah, and I do think that we were trying to flip level of service on its head a little bit more explicitly in this general plan update. In General Plan 2020, we identified level of service. I mean, that was really the main way of looking at traffic impact, but we also identified VMT in General Plan 2020. And we tried to really emphasize, in part because of recommendations from TSC, they wanted us to remove all reference to level of service entirely. And we recommended keeping it in because we more explicitly flip it on its head in this document and explicitly state that we're using it as a means for, creating better safety for bikes and peds. And if you look at packet page 17 at the very top, it talks about how we do that. Deprioritizing level of service for management considerations for city streets. Goes on to say, decades of research and experience show that projects that attempt to relieve congestion and improve LOS simply attract more traffic and ultimately unsuccessful at relieving congestion. Furthermore, congestion is often desirable from a safety standpoint as it results in slower traffic speeds. And so that's really been our objective. It's never been so clearly articulated. We tried to do that in this document. And then I think to Colin's points as well, I think we do need to look carefully at, the vehicular improvements and make sure that we're still consistent with the policy objectives. I believe we are. I'd need to think about that in a little bit more detail, but our objective here is not to completely remove reference to vehicular traffic, but to really make sure that it's balanced and prioritized towards alternative modes.
Do we presently have any class 4 bike lanes?
No, we don't.
And so what they'll look like is some kind of temporary partition between traffic and the lane, is that correct?
Yes, it'll be there'll be some physical barrier between the bike lane and the vehicle.
I would say the closest thing we have to it, and maybe you can tell us what distinguishes it from an actual class 4, is the section of the trail that's on L Street near the Creamery building, where you have L Street, the separating median, and then the trail.
But the trail is a class 1, so we call that trail as a class 1 because of the width.
Right, thank you, I forgot about that. This is why he's the traffic engineer.
Just while we're on the subject of class 4 bike lanes, I have a really strong preference for, concrete or bollards to be the separator and not like little plastic sticks like a lot of communities do. The reason they do that is that people won't scratch the paint on their cars, but I would much rather people scratch the paint on their cars than hit bicyclists.
Yeah, I'll second that. I ride a bike a lot, and plastic parts are not going to keep me from the car.
Or really even slow the car down that much. And so I guess while we're talking about this too, because Meredith brought up G&H Street, and single lane, and I think the intention then behind that too would be able to add a class 4 bike lane on G and H Street, to be able to, if you're going down to 1 lane and having a road diet, you can then use that lane to, increase your bikeability and widen your sidewalks.
So how do other city council members feel about adding, stronger protections for class 4 bike lanes to the language?
Yeah, I support that, and I agree with, what you and Peter said.
Are planting strips like street tree pathways also considered that division? And would that be stout enough for you?
Yes, the landscape would consider with the curb, yes.
Is it a proposal to make G and H streets 1 lane?
I would like it to be.
I would like it to be.
I would like it to be.
I think various of us have discussed it. It sounds like we've all approached nature about it at one time or another. And when we discussed it, it was a measuring thing. We had the tapes out there measuring it off. So I think it's, some desires also with what's possible through engineering. But it sounds like, just from what I'm hearing here, it's not a uncommon thought or idea.
No, I was just going to point out there was a community member that was hoping to speak, so I was going to ask if you wanted to open public comment again, or if you want to continue the discussion.
If it's a question, we can hear it and ask it, but we did comment. But I would add that, we're throwing out this idea of, G and H, but I mean, obviously that would be, these are things that we could hope for in a general plan, right? Obviously, there would be significantly more.
We strive to ensure.
Yeah, we're going to strive to ensure that there could be a road diet on those streets, but obviously there would be a lot more, public and business and community input on that, and looking at, getting the tape measure out and all of that, and community and engagement on that topic, because that is a pretty significant one, though a lot of these, are obviously significant ideas in here, so.
Yeah, well, we're striving for things. In terms of walkability and nature, I'm glad you touched on the topic of trying to blend the two sides of Arcata back together. 101 I see as a really awful experience when you're walking or biking across it. It feels like you're entering a juvenile hall or something with chain link and noise. And I have seen in many other cities, more modern or recently built overpasses, that they have lovely fences with silhouettes of deer and, I don't know, trees and things that, and there might even be some kind of a modern fence that does a little bit of sound deadening, maybe, I don't know. But that, I know it gets into Caltrans turf and stuff, but I did see in this element that there is a relationship with Caltrans about encouraging landscape and stuff, and it feels like this could fit into that. And those fences have been there since the overpasses were built in the 70s and never replaced. So maybe our time is up for some kind of discussion about how much better it would feel if they were more like an artistic thing than just the industrial chain link that's been squished and manipulated and cut and
bleak.
It's just bleak. It's not where anybody ever wants to walk, and we all have to walk there just to get across our town.
And I know there's been, talk, and I think, some work in the mix on at least beautification and artistic, endeavors, at least on the footbridge, which is probably the most imposing and chain link of all of them. But yeah, I totally wholeheartedly agree with that, Dan, and that just, there's probably something better that we could do for that, especially if we're looking at, seeing 11th Street and extending bike lanes on that, and that pathway. And so I think that's a great idea.
Nature, can you just talk briefly about the reconnecting Arcata and how that might parlay into that conversation?
Yeah, I just didn't want to go in detail because it's definitely a good dream, good goal to have. So when I said, yeah, strive, strive, we are striving today. So reconnecting Arcata is going to be a great project if we get the grant. The grant application is in, and we are hopeful to hear by sometime early next year. Even if we don't hear back in positive response, we will be keep on trying for those applications because now we know how the application looks like, what the project is, so we will be successful at some point. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 shots, and this is our first shot at. So what Reconnecting Arcata does is one of the concept in that is connecting portion of Cal Poly Humboldt from, let's say, from 14th Street to 17th Street. You are not able to see a highway. So if you extend the 14th Street bridge all the way, extend that bridge all the way to 17th. So people will be able to walk through it. It could be a potential for transit. We will gain 5 acres of property. Some of that could be dedicated for housing, transit hub. So there is a lot of good goals, good amenities in that area, and that's how we have presented the project. Definitely, it will be a very, very expensive project. We call it the Arcata Cap. Right now, that's what we are calling, and definitely, we have to go regional in this one. So we are partnering with Cal Poly Humboldt, Caltrans, EdgeCog, HTA, anybody who will be able to be a good partner in that project. So we are working with them. So we are very hopeful, and even if it doesn't happen today, it will be happening in future.
Nature, let me understand this. You're saying the 14th Street Bridge would extend entirely over the freeway for 3 blocks?
Start with 3 blocks, and there'll be a tunnel for the vehicles to go through. Yes.
Wow.
And I think as part of that, the way
Let's put insure on that.
I think part of the conversation about reconnecting doesn't have to just be that large, ambitious project. It could be something more along the lines of what you were discussing, Commissioner Tagney.
So yeah, I think since we're talking reconnecting Arcata, I want to make sure you don't hear that. I'm just trying to we are just trying to connect the one portion. When we submitted the application, we have 3 areas. 3 areas being one being the Valley West, which is like an island between 2 highways, 299 and 101. So we need to reconnect that back. We need to connect the whole central portion of Arcata. We need to connect it back. Again, Samoa 255, that divides Arcata, South Arcata, and 101. So we need to reconnect that. So in the grant application, we are trying to connect all the areas that has been divided and bisected by Caltrans or by highway. We're trying to reconnect it back. So that's the idea, and that's the concept.
I was just wondering, with the Craftsman Mall coming in and Lewis Avenue, that bridge right there, in the circulation maps and street design on, to your point of number 4, talking about the landscaping and along the freeway corridors in Arcata, improving aesthetics, and then possibly even a noise buffer because it's going to get quite busy there. Is that something that we can address also? I didn't see it in here, and I was looking at, we had all kinds of other, but I didn't see any mention of anything for that particular way. Yeah.
Currently, we don't have a plan for St. Louis overcross. There is a sidewalk, there's a bike lane. As a part of the Craftsman project, they will be improving the road, which is St. Louis Road, that goes to the project. They will have a bus stop. There will be a walkway. There is not enough width on the road to put a bike lane, so we are working with that, how we can best fit that. And also that project will be on the alignment of Annie and Mary Trail. So most of the hope is most of the people will be students living there would be using our future Annie and Mary Trail, and they'll be walking from there to the skate park and to the Sunset Avenue.
So if they're on a bicycle, how would they navigate that? Like, it's
from the trail, like from the Craftsman project, it will connect to the trail, which is a class 1 trail, 10-foot wide paved.
So it'll take them over to Sunset, and then
Yes.
they'll come over that
Yes.
way, as opposed to, because I'm thinking that they're not going to do that. They're just going to go right over where Lewis Avenue is, and it's kind of sketch right now.
No, that's a shortcut for them if.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like organically, that's what they're going to use.
Well, the trail would be the shortcut.
Shortcut.
That would be the long way around. And then also I see on here too, on that same table that I referenced before, on page 29, going the other way, I guess, too. So that would be on Spear and St. Louis, on the area from Janes Road to LK Wood. So that would be improvement on that same corridor going over to LK Wood also as well. And so it lists both the Annie and Mary West End Road to Arcata State Park and Spear and St. Louis from Janes, right? So towards the hospital, down up Spear and to St. Louis to that bridge that you're talking about.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Because we are getting way down deep in the weeds. And so, this is your meeting. You can go there if you want, but I would suggest maybe zooming out a little bit. The CIP is really where the projects are planned, and you look at those annually, the capital improvement program. These are just kind of like ideas. The projects that are in this document are just ideas, and in some ways, it's a little misleading to have them in here as a table because it almost seems like, oh, that's the entire list. So I would suggest maybe we put some language around, these are example projects. And then if we zoom out, the one thing that I want to make sure that you do reserve some time for, we've got about 25 more minutes for this particular topic, is, digging into the policies at the end of the document, if you wanted to talk about those at all.
Sounds good, yeah. And I was just, as you were saying that, reading that language, right? These are a list of possible projects that meet our goals, right, of things that we want to do. So, and as I said before, those projects will all come back before all of us, before they ever would happen anyway. All right, well then, yeah, let's, as David suggested, look at kind of those last 3 pages here of looking at some of those policies. And I'll kind of turn it over to the commission first if you've had a chance to think about those. I mean, what stands out? What are any of those policies ones that we definitely, don't want to see in our general plan? Are those things that are to be integrated?
I think, David, you probably have a sense of some of the policies that may be specific and would be less appropriate to pour into the general plan, and I would think that would be the place to start.
And those are listed out pretty clearly here as well.
Yeah,
and it looks good to me, but.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, so the way the table is laid out, that's exactly right. What the mayor said, that these are, there we go, the mobility policy, and then there's a table or the column that tells you whether it's would be new to the circulation element or similar to an existing one. And then the ones that I would recommend we not port into the circulation element are the ones that say specific to Gateway. And what we'll say in this meeting is instead, don't include those in the general plan if you don't want to include them. If you do want to include anything that is on this that's listed as not being incorporated, I can edit that now in real time as we're going through these.
You editing, does that mean taking Gateway off of some of these so that they can get moved over?
If that is where the council and commission, land. So for example, this 7B would not be recommended to move into the general plan. If you wanted to move that into the general plan circulation element, I would modify that in this table.
Okay, so what, I'm a little confused. So what process do you want us to undergo right now? I mean, I feel like it's already pretty listed out, and so I think we don't want to include any that are specific to the Gateway because that doesn't make sense. And so then, I mean, I guess looking at the list of ones that are already similar existing policies and saying, yes, let's go ahead with those, or just looking at it as a comprehensive list, these ones that have to do with circulation, because I'm just kind of going through and highlighting here. I mean, yes, obviously we want to plan our circulation for planned growth because that's what you do.
I mean,
go ahead.
Outside of the ones that have been listed out as not appropriate to port over. I think the question is, are there any other ones that there's a reason why we wouldn't want to?
Yeah, and maybe what
More
we-
of a negative vote kind of thing. Is there
Yeah.
anyone that sees something in there that they don't think would be appropriate in the general plan? Because I think the rest of it is appropriate to port over in relation to achieving the goals that Metro laid out at the beginning.
Yeah, so the first question is, does everyone agree with the ones that say specific to the gateway to remove those from consideration for tonight? Or are there any that you want to hold on to discuss?
No, let's just remove them.
So do we just want to like start assuming that we've removed those and delete the unnecessary policy guidance, just to go through it rather quickly, like starting with 7A and move on through? Because there's not a whole lot after we.
I don't even think we need to like go through.
Yeah, I
one
mean,
by one. I
because
just
like
think
I've
if
already
the-
gone through and kind of highlighted the ones, and so I mean, yeah. If we are.
So, okay, so what I'm hearing is if there's a similar to another policy, don't include that. If it's a new policy to the circulation element, port that in.
Yes.
Yes. I
Is
mean,
there
why wouldn't they?
specifics that we might want to talk about? Does anybody want to talk about 7M?
7M. Oh, there we go. Gosh, there's a lot of swiping to get to 7M. Disallow the placement of parking lots along the street frontages in the interest of maintaining continuous building frontage along primary commercial streets, improving walkability. I mean, on that one, I mean, the inclusion of the phrase primary commercial streets makes that one so I do want it to be, part of other policies. I mean, I could see a world where, they're building a parking lot in a neighborhood that is not a commercial, thing, and that might be more appropriate there. But I think, I definitely don't think parking should be front and center. Anecdotal, I was just in Las Vegas and everything has a parking lot in front of their strip mall and it's absolutely horrible looking and it's ugly and awful, so.
Was that the one you were referring to, Kimberly, or did you say 7N, which is the minimized vehicle trips via land use? Is that?
No, M as in Mary.
Okay.
I guess I was just wondering if there's anything that is already status quo that would be affected by that.
Well, I don't think, if it's already exists, then we can't, yeah, that exists.
I like all of these.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so this is similar to CM6C. CM6C reads, parking standards for new development. The city should continue to specify maximum parking requirements for new development and eliminate minimum parking requirements. Parking lots should be located where feasible to the rear or side of the commercial and multifamily residential buildings. So it's already kind of covered. My recommendation is to not include this.
It's one thing to,
Because it's redundant. So if this says, I'm sorry, if this says similar to, then my recommendation would be don't incorporate it.
Okay, so all of the specifics too will be different, and the specifics.
Yeah, so unless there's something specific about it, so if you were to say to me, no, I really want to retain parking lots and structures must be located behind buildings or otherwise located in subordinate obscure design features in the design element, in addition to it being in here, the design element is where I would suggest that land. Otherwise, if it's similar to another policy, there's no reason to add policy for the sake of adding language.
So,
d-
Peter's had his microphone on quite some time.
they're not the same, David, because this one says disallow, and the one you read was suggestive but not prescriptive. So they're not the same, and I favor this one.
Yeah, the response I would have to that is that this is clearly a shall. And so, you can certainly put that in if you don't want to see parking lots anywhere where there's a, commercial. Oh, go ahead.
It does say primary commercial streets, so it is only part of the city, it's not all the city.
Yeah, it is a much stronger statement. I completely agree with that. But this is also still policy, and so the question is, do you want to allow yourself the flexibility in the zoning ordinance where this actually gets implemented to say, this, in this particular situation, we don't want to actually disallow that for X, Y, or Z reason. When we were writing the new standards for a very small area of town that has some homogeneity around design features, the gateway area, I think we were a little bit more comfortable saying, completely disallow new development here. I can't tell you off the top of my head that this is going to be right for every single neighborhood in the city that has a commercial frontage.
I concur. I think that we can address them as we go through each of the areas of opportunity or neighborhoods.
Yeah, and the language that's in 6M, and I'm not trying to, drive the conversation here. If the rest of you, want to do it, then we should definitely do that by incorporating that. But I think the language that's in CM6C allows us to then implement zoning ordinances that would disallow it in one area and maybe allow it in another one.
I'm trying to get to the language that you just, and look at the difference between the language and the two here, but.
It's
gonna
packet
be
page 43.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I can't pull it up on the screen here. We have a internal network error that's not letting me pull it up.
So 7M was very specific to, like you said, the gateway area plan. And if we do not get rid of this, then we will not be able to have any latitude in a different area where maybe we might not want to have it so cut and dried.
Yep.
Well, I'll just say one more time, it is restricted to primary commercial streets, not all streets, not even most streets.
So it could come up in the Zanzi project area, right? I mean, immediately, or right now there's stuff going on there.
Again, I want to avoid getting into too much detail, but that one actually has some unique characteristics because of the way that it was approved. There's actually a development agreement, and so they're frozen in amber for the 2008 land use code.
Just another difference between the two is CM6C is about all new development, whereas that policy was about commercial streets. And so it's sort of a, all but looser versus specific and tighter, sort of two different standards.
I would tend to, I like the wording of 7M better than CM6C as well with these two folks right here.
I'm okay with that. 7N.
So we got 2 yay 7M, 1 nay. Stacy, how do you feel about 7M?
Okay, so we will incorporate, so there's a proposal here to incorporate it into the design element, but maybe we incorporate it into CM6C.
Okay.
Whoops. Okay.
Yeah, if the council is considering, right now, just these similar to and not moving those over, 7L, the note is similar to CM6A and CM6C. And I don't think those may be similar, but it's certainly not identical. I would suggest maybe you keep or move 7L into the general plan?
Yeah, I support that.
Me too.
Okay.
All right. In the essence of time, as we're kind of now getting into this really more specific integration of this table than I had a vision for us to be doing. But overall, as we're kind of pulling out these policies, I do think, as the easiest guidance, as you said, David, I mean, I think the ones that are specific to Gateway and the ones that have kind of existing things are largely okay to be deleted, but I think we're hearing a lot of folks talking about ideas, especially around like parking minimums and maximums and like parking and parking frontage, and these are the ones that kind of keep coming up. And so I think maybe if we want to look more deeply at those parking policies at a different time, maybe at a future, council meeting.
You certainly could. What I would suggest is if there's kind of like the alternative, because I created this category where it says, for example, curb extension, all new roadways, land use or circulation, and that's similar to 4C, CM4C. So you could say either nix it because it's similar to that policy, or keep it and move it into those chapters. So that's sort of the decision point. So I guess I maybe overstated what what this category is. So let me just put out there a different question. For the ones that are, have a similar to, but they also have a policy or a policy area to drop these into, are there any that you don't want to drop them into those policy areas? Because there are some that say nix this, it's no longer relevant. There are some that we've already nixed because they're relevant only to a specific area. So that's kind of a different question. Do you want to keep all of the policies that have a similar to, but they also have another element that they're identified with? Or are there ones that you want to get rid of entirely?
I don't think I've seen anything that I want to entirely get rid of.
Yeah, the only reason I would want to get rid of it is if it's, completely redundant, is kind of how I feel about it. Except for, the ones that are really, truly quite specific to the Gateway and talk about specific streets and specific areas and, everything like that. But, yeah.
Yeah, I've always thought that there's some really good things in here that would absolutely carry over well.
Yeah, here's an example. So 7D, plan for enhanced transit lines and stops. We adopted a lot of policy in the Gateway we adopted this policy in the Gateway area to make sure that we focused on that. But this is very similar to CM3A, CM3B, CM3F, 3H. I think that this is largely redundant. I wouldn't recommend keeping this in. And so we can, if using that rubric, you're comfortable with that, and also recognizing that you'll have one more opportunity, through a formal, more formal process to look at these recommendations. I think what I'm hearing is directing staff and the Planning Commission to consider these policies incorporated into the circulation element, with the exception of those that are truly redundant.
And the ones that specifically call out Gateway, yes.
Yeah, and the ones that are, specific to Gateway. Yep. I support that.
As do I.
Gradients of agreement. Other council members, are we okay with what David said before we move on? Meredith and I are a gradient of agreementing. One.
Yep. I think it sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Confirm? Okay, just so we can hear from everybody. All right. Before we move on from circulation, are there any final thoughts or points from the commission or council that we want to make about circulation? All right. Then we will take it into this piece on inclusionary zoning, and I will turn it over to staff to give that update, and Scott as well.
Okay. I'm going to give a very brief introduction to the inclusionary zoning discussion. But I guess I want to start with a first question, because I think if we get the first question out of the way, then there's something to talk about, or maybe nothing to talk about. So the planning commissioners and city council members, different folks in the community have stated over the last several months, hey, we want to see inclusionary zoning citywide. We've been really focused on looking at inclusionary zoning only in the Gateway area. We've been talking about trying to develop that program out and, keeping the concentration on that. On the 15th, the city council said, hey, let's look at incorporating all of these gateway policies, which ones need to be broader citywide. Inclusionary zoning is one that's come up over and over and over again. And so in planning for this meeting, the mayor was interested in, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm speaking on your behalf a little bit, interested in having the discussion with the whole group about whether or not you want to, at this time, start talking about inclusionary zoning citywide. The Planning Commission has made a recommendation on what the program would look like in the Gateway. Now is an opportune time to, expand that to the entire city if you're interested in doing so. So first question, should we have this conversation about expanding inclusionary zoning citywide? And the second part will be to talk about the detail.
Yep, I would love to hear
Yes.
from the commission on that, because you guys did develop, this policy, and kind of hear what you folks think about it before I jump in and say yes, like others might. But I'd love to hear from the commission.
It feels like the conversation needs some explanation of what that means, like what other parts of the city are going to be impacted and how. And that's a pretty complicated question, I imagine, so.
Actually, I think it's pretty simple. The recommendation that you made at your last council commission meeting triggers at 30 units. So once a project hits above 30 units, then those percentages start coming into play. And so there currently aren't a whole lot of areas throughout the city where you can develop a project at 30 units, but that doesn't mean that the policy can't be implemented citywide.
Yeah, I mean, the Planning Commission dialed the numbers back a little bit in order to create some daylight, a gap between the inclusionary zoning numbers and the state density bonus. And I think it makes sense to apply this where possible across the city. This specific piece, we talked about this a lot. There's too many unknown variables to be able to really nail this down ahead of time. Almost more than any other piece, I feel like we've gotten as close as we can reasonably get by looking at all the other factors that are in play, and that this is a place where we need to just go with this and start seeing what projects come out the other side. And then we can look at those projects and decide if the numbers we set got us where we wanted to or didn't, and make changes. But that we could talk about this for a really long time and never be able to know for sure because there's just too many unknown variables.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that unlike a lot of the other issues with the Gateway area, there's no physical limitation with regard to inclusionary housing. I mean, the inclusionary housing proposal is not territorial to a specific neighborhood. There's nothing that attaches, we'll only have it makes sense here, but it doesn't make sense there. I think personally, the inclusionary housing would apply equally throughout the city.
Oh, go ahead.
No, Peter, then yeah.
I agree with what you said, Joel. I expressed this reservation last time at our meeting. My fear is, as Scott said, we're trying to walk a narrow space between the density bonus and the inclusionary housing requirement. And my fear is that it's such a small space that any developer is going to choose the density bonus because it's a better deal by a long shot. It's easier to permit. It has waivers associated with it. If I'm the developer, that's what I'm going to choose. So my fear is that, and I don't know if this will happen, and Scott's right, we need to see what's going to happen. But my fear is that nobody's going to use this because the state density bonus is there for them, and they'll probably use that. And I'll point out that our wonderful community benefits program is out the window if people choose the density bonus.
Yeah, so just to something Joel said, I just want to emphasize you won't be able to use this in most of the city because in most of the city you can't build more than 30 units. And when you think about inclusionary as a concept, the real like inclusionary in our city is about, just geographic zoning of where you can and cannot build multifamily housing. And so we get caught up on this like 1 out of 30 units in the new multi-story building when our whole city is sort of exclusionary in a sense because it's something that's been bugging me with this whole conversation, but.
That is a really good point. I like that. All right. Any other commission? That was most everybody. Dan, if you got anything, but all right.
Could I ask
Go
a
ahead.
question?
Yeah, please.
We had changed it to, what is it, 10% is what we were talking about for moderate income for inclusionary zoning, which is like more than twice of what we would have for low income or lower income, and that was based on what, workforce housing? And I guess I'm wondering, do we have data to support that for here in Arcata? Or research to say that that's I guess, yeah, that's my question.
Do we have data to support the categories?
That particular percentage as 10% seems just rather high.
The number was recommended by staff as a starting point to kick the discussion off. There was a lot of conversation with the council about establishing some kind of workforce housing. It was quite frankly difficult to make the numbers work. And so, so we finally kind of landed on more of a rubric for how to develop an inclusionary zoning program for moderate or for median income. I definitely think we need to put more energy into sourcing data for specifically what the program would look like. But what we wanted to do was kind of draft out sort of the framework. And if the council said, yeah, let's do that, then we would spend the time and energy and money to try and get it supported. But the 10% is arbitrary. It could be 5%, it could be 15%.
I guess I'm just thinking, while we've met our RENA numbers for extremely low and low income, and we do have that need right there in that particular moderate income, we still, regardless of our RENA requirements, we have a great need for low income housing and extremely low still. So just wanting to see if we could maybe lower that number a little bit. And also just thinking about the 30, is it 39 units also? 30, okay. 29 is what I'm thinking, right. I'm just wondering if we might want to lower that also a little bit.
I'll just add, because kind of I think partially where the 10% came from too, because maybe 2 study sessions ago, because that was a request that I made after doing kind of some research and talking to David a bit about, because everybody always says Santa Cruz has 20% inclusionary zoning, but most of their inclusionary zoning is for area median income. It's part of the inclusionary. And so that's how they make and bolster this big 20%. But the low and the very low is actually only a small percentage of that 20%, similar to what we're kind of looking at here with, what's presented in the staff report, with the either choosing the 4 or 6 for low, very low, and then having a higher, proportion of that area median income to get to that overall. It basically creates like a rent stabilization in a sense, right? Because you're guaranteeing that there are units here that are, affordable to area median income, basic, salary of the region. So
It's essentially a hedge against gentrification in those units. And I think to the extent to which we're not going to be able to know, as I said earlier, it's all a little bit arbitrary. But when we talk about changing the percentages, if you look at how it doesn't really change the unit creation that much because of the rounding and the small number of units that are going to get produced. If we change the percentages, it's not really a meaningful difference in the amount of housing production, which is part of why we decided, let's just go with this, see what we get built, and then be willing to respond.
And that was the key point that we all just settled on. We just have to throw the dart at the dartboard at some point and just say, go with it. And let's see what gets built, if anything. And these numbers can change over time. We can revisit, or future commissions and councils can revisit.
I just wanted to say that I'm staying on the periphery of some of these because, as I said in the last meeting, I wanted Meredith and Kimberly and Sarah to take the lead on what was being pulled and put into the general plan. So I'm listening and all, but just on the periphery for right now.
The only thing I have a problem with, and I talked to David about this a little, is that these rents that are called out here are ridiculous. I mean, I don't think that that the market rent is like even close to being.
I think this is like wages.
No.
Or which one are you looking? What are you looking
I'm
at?
at table 3.
Oh.
I mean, so I just don't think that really is true. I don't think that you can get a 1-bedroom for $975 or $980 in any place.
But that's what it's saying. That's what this inclusionary zoning would make it be, right? Isn't that's what my understanding was.
Okay, this table is from the staff report from the Planning Commission, so these table numbers don't add up, but this is the table I believe you're looking at. And what we tried to do here was to show low home rent and high home rent are rents that are published from HUD and through HCD annually. And I wanted you to be able to compare what someone who's living in a studio that is restricted to 80% area median income would be paying versus what the HCD thinks fair market rent is countywide. This is based on data that they source. And then we did a little bit of research to develop these numbers for unit sizes through 5-bedroom. There's not a whole lot of data out there right now, but basically, I agree, Meredith, this doesn't seem like it's completely applicable to me, but this is what we found with the limited resources that we spent trying to develop this to start. And so a 1-bedroom at around, $1,200, that's in the range. What we wanted to do here was give you a sense for what this looks like and show you that we could develop a program that works. If the council says, yes, go build an inclusionary zoning program that includes this workforce housing concept, we will do a lot more due diligence on, on market rents to ensure that we're hitting a target that doesn't unduly influence the market, number one, but also, doesn't create rents that are higher than market so that it's not an effective program.
I mean, I think at this point, workforce housing is pretty much low-income housing. I mean, when you add the numbers up, like what is actual Arcata incomes for people that are workforce? I think that would probably fall more into the low category. And if we're trying to build affordable housing, I think that, we need to make sure we do if we want our workforce to live here.
Yes, I definitely think there are a lot of wage earners out there that are earning 80% area median income. And we have programs that, go beyond inclusionary zoning that we've been very effective at creating that kind of housing. And so, I do agree that the, portion of the workforce that is earning 80% area median income or less would benefit from higher inclusionary zoning numbers.
Yeah, I mean, because like people are saying, right, we haven't done anything yet. We're riding a fine line. There's no data on what people will choose. So why don't we err on the side of low income housing then, and then we can always stop and recalibrate. But I mean, that's just what my thought is.
Yeah, so I presented these data, and part of the reason for that part of what we have to be careful of is if you have a inclusionary zoning requirement that is too high, you're going to reduce the cost feasibility of a project. So the Planning Commission did look at this table, and there are a lot of caveats around this table. Basically, the way that this table is built is by taking the difference. Let me see if okay. So we took the difference between the market rent and what the restricted rent would be for these different income categories, and multiplied that by 12 months and then multiplied that by 55 years. This gives you sort of a life cycle cost of creating an inclusionary zoning unit. And so you can see with a low income unit, you're basically for a 2-bedroom, saying we're going to ask you to, pay $110,000 to create a 2-bedroom unit. For a 3-bedroom unit, we're going to ask you to pay $442,000 for 80% restricted income unit. So that is the cost impact per unit on a project. So you can imagine if you had 10 low-income units because you wanted, 30% restricted or 20% restricted to low income, you're talking $1 million off that project's pro forma right from the start.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not, suggesting that we go that high. I was thinking 12% or 15%.
Could I ask a quick question? I'm just remembering watching the Planning Commission, and Peter had some things to say that really came to light for me, and I'm wondering if you'd be comfortable in speaking on that.
Yeah, what I said was most financial analyses don't go out 55 years. Typically, they go out 15 or 20 years. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is that if this is a unit out of 30, it's a small fraction of the total. So those are the things I said. So I don't think the financial penalty to a developer is as great as it seems.
Thank you. And I was also wondering, is there a provision for utilities in here?
There is.
And it doesn't seem very realistic at all. I mean, it was I'll take that if that's what you're saying the utilities are, but
especially with PG&E.
it's not even realistic.
So I just want to be clear about the method that we used was the similar method that is used for HCD programs. And the idea behind the utility allowance is that it's set by the housing authority annually. We don't get to pick it, they pick it, and it's not going to cover 100% of your utilities. That's not designed to. It's a utility allowance. And so you would receive that utility allowance based on the types of utilities that you're paying for, the kind of, heating, et cetera. In this example, we picked a number that is in the ballpark. And so again, I don't want you to look at this and say, oh, that's the program we're implementing. We tried to show that there is a way to make a program for a median income inclusionary zoning program that would work. And so that's where that was coming from. For these other numbers, you know, it would depend, this is a mock-up. So it would depend on, you know, what the unit count would actually, or what the units actually looked like. So this is the, for example, again, going back to the high home rent for a 0-bedroom studio, $812 is the rent that home sets for a 0-bedroom apartment. And then for a given apartment, you would look at what utilities are in there, and then you would calculate the utility allowance, and you would reduce that $812 by whatever the utility allowance is. Has no relationship, bears nothing in relation to what the person is actually paying for utilities. It's not intended to. It's programmatic. It's systematic. It's not individualized. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm really missing the 2-bedroom apartment I had in Portland for $650 20 years ago. But I mean, I certainly don't want to stymie any developers from building anything because we're setting the percentage too high, but I would like to try. I mean,
yeah, the other issue that you run into, and I let the planning commissioners speak to this, is that once you get above the density bonus thresholds, then your inclusionary zoning process is moot. You know, we're basically forcing people to take a density bonus, and then, you know, we're going to, as Commissioner Lehman said, we're going to lose some of the benefits of the planning work that we're attempting to do here.
And that's that thin line that Commissioner Lehman also said.
Well, so I just want to bring up, so to bring us back to grounding, I think the question is really, first and foremost, I think before we really get into nitty gritty numbers, is this a citywide policy that the council wants to pursue? And then we need to have our attorneys look at it and make sure we're good to go on that. And then I think, you know, if we want to have a conversation at the council level about these specific numbers that, you know, the commission has recommended, we can go into there. But as I'm, you know, feeling right now, and I will start this conversation for my other council members, I am excited and feel very comfortable moving forward with some form of inclusionary zoning, including this recommendation in front of us citywide for some of these larger developments. And I do kind of, you know, walk the line, I think, of kind of what Scott and Dan and a little bit that Peter alluded to is like, let's just get something going so we can see how it shakes out, and especially not knowing yet in our community how the state density bonus law is going to come into play here and how it's going to impact, you know, what our development is going to look like. We haven't had, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody come in and use that yet. And so it'll be interesting, you know, to see how that plays out. And I think we do just need to get something going to see how that works together.
I'll agree with that, Sarah.
So that is to say that we can hash out the details later.
And that is this, first and foremost question, is this something that the council does want to take to a citywide level? And then,
yes,
you know, begin working with these numbers, have our city attorneys, you know, break those numbers down, make sure that a policy like this can be applied citywide, because I know that there are some legalities involving that. And then, you know, if we do want to return to the conversation and talk about, you know, how many units does this kick in? Do we like these percentages, et cetera, and move forward, you know, at a council level on that.
We want to make clear that we're talking about the opportunity zones, right? We're not talking about like building 6-story buildings in Sunnybrae. Right?
No, we're talking about any development over 30 units being built in the city of Arcata having inclusionary zoning, whether that be in an opportunity zone, whether it gets principally permitted and it's happening, I don't know, right over here at the Uniontown Shopping Center, who knows, whatever. You know, we don't know what a developer is going to build when and where. We can assume and we can know, you know, where vacant properties are, things being redeveloped, but, you know, no, I don't think we're going to, I don't think this is going to cause us to see 6-story buildings in Bayside.
No, but we need to start moving forward. So I do agree that this is a good starting point.
And yes, I agree that we should do that. And I think when we get to the point of hashing out the details, that the Planning Commission, I believe, has spent a lot of time going over that. So to kind of heed their advice. And I don't know if you guys had any type of communication or guest speakers when you were doing this regarding like maybe talking to somebody who builds within these models to see, if this was what we were doing, would you want to build, just to ask someone in real life. I don't know if that's been done, but that could be something that we consider, because sometimes what's philosophical isn't what's practical. But I think we should go down that road.
Yeah, please.
Oh, I just was like real excited about the guest speakers bringing those on. I know that was something was requested early on.
Yeah, I know we all talk to random people, but yeah, to have somebody, come and address us as a whole and get those questions answered could be beneficial as well. Yeah. All right. David, do you need any further direction from us, or council or commission? Do we have any questions or comments that we would like to add on inclusionary zoning at this point? All right. Well, closing, appreciations, and next steps. Again, commission, thank you for all that you have done on general plan, gateway, all planning projects in the city in general. And just thank you guys so much. And David, do you have any closing thoughts, or are we good to go?
No, I just want to appreciate you all for all the work that you put in. It's, it's definitely a great public service to our community. Thank you.
Quick question, is this the last of our study sessions for?
Well, I mean,
will
that could
continue.
actually be a question that we pose. I mean, is future agenda items, I mean, are there anything that you guys are burning to discuss with us, or think about it and send me or David an email and let us know if you don't want to say, no, I don't want to work with you guys anymore right now. No. So yeah, I mean, think about it. Feel free to reach out to David and I if there's, any big topics that you would like to discuss with the council, or I think the council will be having a couple more study sessions, but I don't know if you guys will be there or not. We'll find out. No. Stay tuned. Okay. Good night. Adjourned.